Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, February 4th, and we are joined by our panel of top local journalists. Josh Molina, international man of mystery and multi-platforms.
Mystery.
Jun Starkey of the Santa Barbara Independent, and Nick Welsh, award-winning columnist 2 years in a row after Starshine won it 13 years in a row, and executive editor of the Indy. Thank you all for joining us. Quick look at COVID. We've had a big spike in deaths, which is a lagging indicator, as we all know by now. But more than 30 deaths in the last 2 weeks, bringing the total to about 610 as the nation hits 900,000 deaths. And who would have thought that when we started talking about this 2 years ago? An increase in hospitalizations, but overall cases down 60%. So good news and bad news. A lot of weird stories this week. We had the sea urchin diver who fell off his boat swimming 5 miles to the 5 hours to the oil platform. And we had the firefighters mysteriously resuscitating cats. And June's going to tell us how you do that. But June had one of the stranger stories also. This guy who's living in a bubble on the mesa, in a styrofoam bubble that he built for himself. What's that all about, June?
Yeah, he was having a mold issue in his apartment, and I guess it got to the point where he was asking for them to come and fix it, and there was a lot of contention between him and his landlord, the Del Monte management, and he just decided that it would be easier to build a styrofoam mold-free bubble in his living room, as far away from the bathroom and the bedroom as possible, to just protect himself, because he felt unsafe breathing in that mold all day.
As well he should. And the apartment owners wouldn't do anything about it?
There's a lot of back and forth on who's to blame for the situation. I mean, obviously the property owner should be checking for that and should be aware and should jump on that as soon as a tenant reports it. But I guess there's some issues with the plumbing, and the bathroom was flooding habitually, and it would get into the wood in the bathroom floor. And in the Ed Hat video that he posted that kind of got him some local attention, he talked about how there were mushrooms at one point growing out of the base of the bathroom wall.
Wow.
Yeah, which
is that's some serious one. And
How
you
long has he
also
been
had
living in the styrofoam bubble?
He's been in the bubble for, I think, a month now. So not too long. I think it was just like a standoff between him and his landlords. Like, he didn't want to let them in because they weren't going through the proper channels to ask to come into the apartment, and they didn't want to, serve him an official notice that said, we are going to be entering your apartment on this day. So it was kind of a standoff until they got to a point where it's like, well, just clean it out, please.
And you also had a piece about the habitability of the units at Tropical Gardens on the east side, and that really looked like there were serious issues with mold and other things.
Yeah, I mean, just walking through the park, it's pretty obvious that they're falling apart. Like, they're a step above a shed, like someone just threw together a wooden shed. I mean, you walk in and the floors squish beneath you. Like, I can see in the walls how they're warped from the water coming in. Like, everywhere you look, there's just mold. And I think there's a lot of places in Santa Barbara that might not be as bad, but that we just don't know about. But yeah, that was definitely
Henry, Henry, come here. Henry, come here. It's okay. It's okay. Come here. I'm sorry. I apologize. Henry, you're a good boy. And the tenants union has taken up the cause of those tenants, and the bubble boy as well. I'm not sure, but they've been, it seems like in fairly recently, they've been very high profile.
Yeah, they've been around, I think, since 2018. Like, this particular group of people, the tenants union, like a tenants union, has existed, I think, since the 1980s. But I think this group of people is fairly new, and right now they don't have the means to help people legally, which is a lot of what people need, but they can advocate for them a lot, which is, another big way that they help people out. Because I think especially for tropical gardens, a lot of them didn't speak English. That wasn't their first language. And they needed someone to kind of help communicate with their landlord and explain exactly what help they need and kind of make it clear, like, hey, we know the law, we know that you're obligated to fix this. So if you're not going to, then we're going to take the next step.
Yeah, which brings us to the subject of the always fraught subject of rent control. Josh, which was basically before the council this week in the form of a $200,000 expenditure for a consultant's report. Can you sort that out? Josh is frozen.
Yes, Jerry, we can talk about that. But first, I thought we were going to talk about the 49ers and
Hey,
their epic collapse.
the Rams are soft, okay? The Niners and the Zebras gave that away. 15 yards for hurting Cooper Kupp's feelings. That's a new penalty I hadn't seen before. But meanwhile, on rent control.
I like your blue shirt. It looks better than the red. So the council agreed to spend 200 grand on a consultant to look at how rent control might work in the city of Santa Barbara. It was a longer discussion than it looked like it was going to be. It looked like it was going to end quickly, but council members kept trying to strip away, add things to the proposal, and then everybody just started chiming in, and it got really confusing. Originally, they were going to do a rental registry to sort of see what's available on the market and how much, but some people pushed back. There was a concern that if we spend $200,000, it'll be a down payment toward guaranteed approval of this ordinance at some point. And so there was some caution, like if we go this route, I mean, we're going to end up doing this. And other people were saying, so we don't know if we're going to go this. So they compromised on 200 grand. And I think the most interesting part was just hearing some of the quotes. Randy Rouse really came out in favor of, Mayor Randy Rouse came out in favor of the landlords. He said, we don't want to demonize landlords. I think he said the relationship between a landlord and a tenant is a beautiful one, something to that effect, and that it's beautiful because it's a private relationship and that government should not get involved. So he came out very strong in favor, which is a drastic departure from what former Mayor Kathy Maria would have done.
Well,
So yeah. And then
Well, Nick,
Kristen Sneddon, council member Kristen Sneddon, I think we're seeing this shift where she's really becoming a real power broker on the council. She's sort of seen as she's almost emerging like a Harriet Miller type, where she's able to kind of pull the disparate views and kind of pull them together. She led this discussion and she did it really well. So it's interesting to see if she's going to emerge as sort of the real pivotal player here with Kathy Maria gone. And, she's not deferring to Kathy anymore. She's just taking charge. So Sneddon really brokered that deal.
Yeah, Nick, this whole thing though is really Kathy Maria's revenge. She and Oscar put this in as she was on her way out the door. And it was a 4-3 vote with Mike Jordan, Eric Friedman joining Randy Rouse on the all right thinking people losing side of this. How likely is it? I mean, and you've been covering this stuff since 1926, I think, that there will be rent.
Well, I think it's, Alejandro Gutierrez is going to be the clear swing vote, I think.
Alejandro is?
I think she's likely to be, and from what I've heard, she voted yes and no alternately on Tuesday evening on this. Alejandro's family owns rental property, is what I am told, and she doesn't have to go too far to have sort of the landlord's concern. So but at the same time, she represents a lot of residents who are feeling the pinch a lot harder than other people. So she is going to have a tough spot. I think that, what I've heard is that there was a lot of unclarity from the council members as to what the 200,000 is actually going to buy. What information are they going to get? What information exists out there that could change somebody's mind or focus somebody's jurisdictional scalpel in terms of what they're going to try to accomplish with this rent control? Why 2% as opposed to 1.5% or 3% or 5%? So there's a lot of questions still out there. I think that the tenants shouldn't show up in force and the landlords shouldn't show up in force.
Did not.
Did not. And that will be changing. And I think it's going to be a full court press mobilization from here out. And I think that, it's very uncertain what's going to come out of this.
Well, I mean, so the point of it is, more affordable housing to protect people. But if you look at places where, rent control has been enforced, it discourages construction, it encourages speculation, gentrification, and people don't move because their rents don't go up very much. It's just, I don't think it works.
The traditional economic picture is rent control is good intentions run amok. It's a slow moving train wreck. But I think when people are desperate because of the housing situation, they're not really too concerned about some of those details, but there is an element of desperation. I mean, yes, Santa Barbara rents have been high off the charts since World War II. They've always been ridiculously high, but I think the level is reaching a certain threshold where there's a lot more pain relative to what people's earning powers are, and B, a lot of people are leaving town. So there's a lot of people who don't feel like they've got much to lose, and now you have district elections, so it changes the dynamic.
Yeah, June, do you get any sense from talking to people that the tenants union, this is going to be a big deal, that they're going to jump in on this?
I didn't hear the second part of what he said.
I'm just in covering these tenant stories that you've been covering. Do you get a sense that this is going to be a political priority for the tenants union, for the people who are really organizing on this issue?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've heard them talking about it since I began speaking with the union, and they definitely see it as more of a sentiment, like seeing who on the council is who is on their side, who's on the side of the renters, and who isn't. Because, I mean, there is a lot of nuance to the situation, but at the same time, like when we're constantly hearing from the council and from the mayor that, we don't want to demonize landlords, we don't want to, have the government infringe on a private interaction. Like all that tells them is that they don't have the renters as their priority, right? That private connection that they have, it makes it easier for people to be taken advantage of. And it shows them who their allies are. And I think that that's going to be a way that they politicize it going forward.
Josh, which leads me to ask about your hero, Megan Harmon, who, as usual, had Robert Kennedy-like quotes in your story about this. But I can't help but feel it's a little cynical. She's a real estate lawyer. I mean, she's a contracts lawyer, right? And she knows better. She knows better that rent control is not a way to bring more housing in. What do you make of her cynical position on this?
Jerry, do you really want to dabble into the world of you telling us what Megan Harmon should be thinking? I think that's a very treacherous landscape. I think that she feels very passionate about this issue. Most of her district are renters, and I think she said 80% of her district. So she might have some theoretical sort of, legal book knowledge on the issue of rent control, but I know she's advocating for her tenants and they would like to see some relief. She's really good on this issue. She's really articulate. I mean, she's talking and she's really along with Sneddon, driving the conversation. She's been an advocate on this for a while. So
Yeah.
I think they're going to pass something. Nick is right. Alejandra back in December voted one way, and then she voted differently this time. And we'll see where she ends up. But I think they're going to probably pass something. And since it's Santa Barbara, no one will be happy.
Well, and the other piece of it is, the forecast that if it does go into effect, it would cost the city several $1 million to administer it, multiple FTEs and so on. And it's, this is not a great time with the budget to be.
No, I mean,
Expenses.
that's what did they say in the staff report? They're looking at something like $5 million to administer the program, and the council is facing about a $3 million structural deficit already, and that figure is supposed to be understated. So I'm hearing it's going to be somewhere like 8 or 9 million, if in the hole, if they were to adopt this kind of a Beverly Hills program. And where does that money come from?
Yeah.
That hasn't been really chopped up yet.
And but one final point on this, Josh, though, this was, as you point out, was an extended conversation and complicated, but the new mayor still got everybody out of there by dinner time, right? I mean, it wasn't one of these meetings that ran until 11 or midnight, as we have seen with the previous occupants of the office.
Yeah, the first couple meetings, Randy's done a great job of managing people, managing the speaking, moving it along, and focusing the conversation. I think that previously the council was comfortable letting things go on and on and on. And with Randy, he's a little bit sharper in keeping things in order. That being said, the rent control issue did spiral out of control to the point where Rebecca Bjork, the city administrator, I saw a real difference between her and what Paul Casey would have done. Paul Casey and Jim Armstrong would have turned on the mic and said, here's what I'm hearing the council say, here's where we agree, here's where you disagree. So let's figure out how we can shift the conversation down, in a certain direction where we can get to a motion. And Rebecca Bjork didn't have that on this day. And so it was kind of a clear distinction in styles. She actually said, I'm confused by the motion and I need staff needs clarification. So I think that's an interesting development to watch. Did she get the job? She's the interim. They're discussing it in closed session, whether they're
discussing hiring her.
Yes, they're discussing that, whether they want to offer her the job or not. They had a closed session on Tuesday. There was nothing reported out, but it's possible they may want somebody to come in and sort of be an entirely new, fresh voice.
And the other thing is, it did show that council really split on this issue. I think ideologically as much as, I think Eric Friedman certainly, is very hawkish on the budget, and that was a big issue for him. But Randy, he is against it, the policy as a policy matter. So that'll be interesting to watch this one. And then we have Laura Capps announcing for Greg Hart's old seat, the 2nd District Board of Supervisors seat, and she really came out strong. She raised about 60 grand in the first 3 days after she announced. And these endorsements are just piling up. She got saluted right away. Nick, does that kind of put the kibosh on the Jonathan Abood campaign, and from the perspective of the Democratic Party, if our congressman is behind her?
I don't know what Jonathan Abood's going to do, but it does seem that Laura came out riding a steamroller here. I mean, first she had James, from James Joyce, yes, and then we had and we have Journey, and we are going to
Nick, you're
every female to serve as county supervisor in the past 10 years is going to be coming out endorsing her. So,
And Joyce Dudley.
you know, it's hard way to go. I kind of suspect, right. I think he's going to say this is not my time, but again, I haven't talked to him, so that's just speculation.
I just want to note though that it was James Carriaco who she trumpeted as her first.
Well, people had speculated that
Joyce,
he might.
although I'm sure James will endorse her.
I think James has endorsed her. And he was speculated as someone who might run for the seat. What about Roger Aceves? Do we hear anything about that, Josh?
I have not heard anything from Roger Aceves. He is the guest on my podcast coming up
Oh, yeah?
next week. Yeah, so maybe that will come up. But I have not heard that. I hope Jonathan Abood runs. I don't think that it's good for any of us to have somebody clear the field ahead of time and line up endorsements and raise a whole bunch of money with an email and say, I'm the anointed one. I hope Jonathan runs, and whether he can win or not is not the point. He'll make her work and he'll make her articulate her positions.
Yeah. But again, you know, going back to the Democratic Party endorsement that we talked about last week, it's going to be hard for Jonathan to get it, I would think, with this array of support that she's very broad based array that she's provided. All right. Nick, you had a scoop. You scooped Josh again on the Ty Warner.
How about those Niners, Jerry?
You know, I don't know if you can say if you were the first one out the gate doing a story based on a press release, that you can say it's a scoop. I just happened to get there first. I think I mean, it's an interesting story. Ty Warner, you know, Mr. Beanie Baby mogul who owns the Four Seasons Biltmore, one of the sort of classic signature hotels in Santa Barbara, Montecito, one of the big money makers in terms of bed tax revenues. He has shut the place down, and he's left his workers, about 450 of them, in this sort of legal limbo where they're not laid off, but they're also unable to collect certain contractual benefits that they claim they're entitled to as people who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own. There have been reportedly 2 mediations on the subject that have gone nowhere. And
who's their lawyer?
So they've got Bruce Anticone, who is
He's the top,
well-known, you know, employment law attorney here in town, and we'll see where this goes. I mean, it is interesting. Bed taxes are going off the charts. Hotels are full. They're charging top dollars. The tourist economy is kicking ass. And here's this hotel, that's mysteriously dark for no explanation given.
It's so bizarre.
I think the only construction that's going on there right now is a couple of bollards outside. And so nobody really knows what the mysterious Beanie Baby mogul is doing.
It's too bad they don't have a representative somewhere in the county that might look into it.
Well, you could also say, Jerry, it's too bad they don't have a union like the Miramar Hotel has.
Yeah.
If they had a union, they might actually be able to, you know, do a little bit more than having to go to a private attorney to do a class action lawsuit.
No, that's true. That's true. And June, you had a piece about kind of mass resignations at the Humane Society. What, 13 people or something? What's going on there?
Yeah, so like I guess beginning in August, about 13 employees kind of made an agreement to all bring up concerns about how management was running things. To be honest, it mostly came down to personnel issues. The way that management treated their employees was really unacceptable. They were very combative. It was hard for people to bring up issues. And then it kind of spiraled from there into, you know, people had issues with how dogs were put down with the decision to put down a dog instead of like sending them to a training where they have shock collars or, you know, things like that. I mean, I made it very clear that obviously animal welfare is very emotional, but I think it was just poor management. And I think the current COO over there, Dory Vialon, has a long history of not being very good with other people and having employees not like her management style. So I think that's what it really came down to.
Yeah, and then Josh, you had this piece on the PD, on the police department. Workforce is down 20%, is that?
Yeah, workforce, that includes sworn officers and non-sworn. Best part of this meeting, Jerry, was watching Oscar Gutierrez, Councilman Oscar Gutierrez, ask Barney Malekian if police officers can do their job. Can they opt out of a bulletproof vest? Can they opt out of carrying a weapon? The answer Barney Malekian gave was no. And Oscar said, well, why can they opt out of a mask? Or I'm sorry, why can they opt out of a vaccine? And I just thought that was like pretty remarkable logic by the council member to suggest that. And Barney Malekian said, not the same thing, you know, sorry. They can opt out of the vaccine. There's science that's changing about the vaccine. It's a personal choice. It's not the same as not carrying a weapon or not carrying a bulletproof vest. There's a significant number, although we don't know exactly how many law enforcement officers don't have a vaccination or are not vaccinated. So it's an issue, but you know, it was just Barney Malekian sort of talking about rebuilding the culture of City Hall and developing a respect for law enforcement after going a year of being criticized publicly. So they're trying. It's hard to hire because of COVID, because fewer people are going into law enforcement nationally after the George Floyd murder. And Santa Barbara is no different. And then you throw in the high cost of living here, and you've got a recipe for fewer officers on the ground.
Yeah, June, you don't have your cat with you this week, but as the world's leading authority on felines, I'm sure you saw the story about the house fire where the 3 cats perished. But in that story, it said that some of the firefighters tried to resuscitate the cats. Can you explain how that works, please?
They give them oxygen. They just put a little oxygen mask like they would give any person who had inhaled too much smoke.
So they have a little teeny mask for
I think they give
for
them
the
the,
cats?
I'm not sure. I'll ask the next time my cat is in a fire, but
Okay.
Hey, Jerry, just remember, don't F with cats.
All right. So Josh, you got Roger on the podcast.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Goleta, 20 years of cityhood, but we're also going to talk about politics and also, you know, all kinds of stuff that he's knowledgeable about as a retired police detective himself.
All right. Okay. And Nick, what do you got going? You had a very fine obit of Gary Hart, which really made the point about how quickly people forget. I mean, he was such a huge influence, and unfortunately, it was before the invention of the iPhone.
Yeah, I know, it is interesting. I mean, he was such a commanding presence here for 20 years and really made, you know, significant legislation in Sacramento. And people like Gary who? Isn't that the Colorado guy who got in trouble with risky business and Donna Rice? So it's, you know, you're a stranger in your own hometown.
Yeah. Well, if people want to know a little bit about the political history and context, check out Nick's piece on Gary Hart. All right. We're out of time. Thank you so much, Josh Molina, Jun Starkey, and Nick Welsh. We will see you next time on Newsmakers.
All right. Take care.